Hi, everybody. This is David P. France. I'm coming to you from Switzerland. I'm actually in Basel again today. And for today's interview, I am going to speak with Henning Rübsam. Henning is a choreographer based in New York City. He is the artistic director of SENSEDANCE, a faculty member of the Juilliard School and Fordham University, and a visiting guest professor at Texas Academy of Ballet. He is the dance curator for Arts at Work and a resident choreographer for Hartford City Ballet. Welcome, Henning. How are you?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, David. I'm fine, thank you very much.
Yeah. Tell everybody where you are right now.
I'm at the very southernmost tip of Texas, very close to the border to Mexico. You know, since you mentioned that I'm teaching also when I'm not in New York, sometimes at the Texas Academy of Ballet, which is just outside of Austin. I was there choreographing and teaching for a long weekend only. That was the plan. And then Mayor de Blasio announced that New York was going to shut down and that schools would be closed and restaurants would be closed. And I just thought, well, all my projects will be falling through. I will not be able to do anything. And if it's really that bad in New York, then I guess I'm not going to go back. And so I just looked on the map and thought, you know, close to the country's edge might be a good place to be, just in case one has to leave. So here I am.
And you're right now, you're in San Pedro Island, or
South Padre. South Padre Island.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Which is off the coast of Texas.
Right. It's you know, I guess the closest city that one would have heard of is Brownsville.
It's
a border town.
I've been to Brownsville, and that's a whole nother story. But it's interesting, right? It's a whole other culture down there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I've never been down here. I'm really enjoying it. It's really wonderful.
Very different from New York. And there's a huge Mexican influence, of course, right? You can feel it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, of course. And since I spent part of my life, you know, every year in Mexico as well, you know, I feel at home here.
Yeah.
So it's great.
Well, let's get into it, because there's a lot that I want to ask you. First, if you can tell the audience, you know, in terms of your background, how you came up, where you were born, your family life, and your decisions, and with regard to dance, you know, give us a broad overview of that, and then we.
Okay. And you stop me if I go into too much detail.
No problem.
You know, just let me know in case I'm rambling.
No problem.
So I was born in Marburg, which is a university town in the very center of Germany, a good hour north of Frankfurt. And I started ballet when I was 5 years old. My parents just thought, you know, here is this kid who sings and dances. Let's support this. And so I didn't know that ballet existed. And then when I saw it, really wanted to do it. And then had a wonderful first teacher who kept my enthusiasm alive, Hiltrud Frank. And then an American came who organized weekend workshops in modern dance. And that American ballet teacher is Carolyn Bognar. And she brought people like Duncan McFarland and Jenny Coogan. Jenny is a Juilliard graduate. She's now a professor in Dresden at the Lucas School. And, you know, her style was Lemon based. And I just thought, oh my God, this is what I want to do. But, you know, I was told, you know, it's good to have a good ballet base. So I studied with another great teacher, André Dutraval, in Kassel, and then auditioned for the Hamburg Opera Ballet School. The Hamburg Opera Ballet, which is led by John Neumeier, and it was believed that it was the best school at the time for ballet. And I'm really grateful I went and finished high school in Hamburg. But at the same time, while I got I think a really good education there, I knew that ballet was not quite right for me. And the idea of of Juilliard, of wanting to move in different ways, of being able to roll around the floor and, you know, having different elements as part of the dance rather than being behind a ballerina. So I sent my information to Juilliard, I applied, and then my high school was done, and I flew over to audition, and they kept me. So that's how that worked. And I think it was, a progression to sort of find out what I wanted, and I had people to guide me, and that was very lucky. And then at Juilliard, it felt that it was the right place for me at the time, definitely.
Mm-hmm. After reading your bio, there were a couple of things that stood out to me in terms of your Juilliard experience. One was the summer intensive with the School of American Ballet. And then also you took classical Spanish dance as well during that time. What was that? What was that?
So I mean, these are
Yes.
the classical Spanish dance and classical Indian dance were part of the curriculum at Juilliard. And I think that was really wonderful, that we had an idea of other dance forms, and that it informs your rhythm. And it also makes you aware that you don't have to be stuck in a certain way of movement. So yes, I mean, of course you want to be true to a technique or to a style, but then when you make up your own dances, then you have all that information, and it makes it so much richer. The summer course at the School of American Ballet was just, when I was at Juilliard, of course you have New York City Ballet across the street, and you have all the wonderful repertory of Jerome Robbins and of George Balanchine. And the ballet classes at Juilliard were, I thought, really good, but they weren't in that Balanchine style. And I thought, hey, School of American Ballet is under the same roof. Why not take advantage of that information as well? How to approach ballet with a different attack. And so, I mean, I was never going to be a Balanchine dancer, never going to be a New York City ballet dancer. But the idea of that there is additional information, and so that's a great thing about New York. You have everything at your at your doorstep. And with being at Juilliard and School of American Ballet now being still in the complex, back then in the same building, I just wanted to take advantage of it. Now I'm happy that Juilliard has all the beautiful studio space that it was supposed to have from the beginning, But yeah, for a young dancer, I think it's just important to get as much information as possible.
So already, what I'm taking from this is that already you were attempting or trying to figure out different ways to express movement. You were exposed to a certain style, and then you said, hey, wait a minute, there's another way. Or that you were exposed to another style and you say, yeah, there's another way. And can you elaborate a little bit more about how you got to the place where you felt comfortable and said, okay, this is my style, or this is what I want to be my style?
I think my style or the techniques I'm using, everything is constantly evolving. And I was 14 or so when I presented my first choreography, under the auspices of that American teacher, Carolyn Bognar. And so I knew I wanted to choreograph. And at Juilliard, I remember when I had to fill out why I wanted to go to Juilliard, it's to study choreography and to learn more about the Lamont technique. And then once I was at Juilliard, hey, there was so much more. But choreography really was at the center. for me from the very beginning. And I had Elizabeth Keane and Doris Rutko as my teachers, and they challenged me, thankfully. And so I think, you know, looking at my work over the years, it's not one style of modern dance, or, you know, if it really depends also on the dancers I work with. How do they inspire me? What can they do? Can they do point work? You know, I'm interested in the barefoot. I'm interested in the point because it has a different traction. It gives you different speeds. And so what interests me at the moment, I want to really delve in and grapple with it, and not just dabble. You know, I want to have the tools, and then with what I learned, want to dig deeper. And I think that is my interest in movement. So yes, is a style, a technique that has an element of flow closer to my energy than a percussive staccato technique. So in other words, is Lemon closer to my soul than Graham? Yes, of course it is. You know, but then the spatial awareness of the Nicolai technique, I mean, that is just incredible how you are dealing with space, and how the weightedness of a gesture, you know, it can open a door with one gesture, and you just make that happen. So it's
well, I'm gonna ask you, you bring me to another point, which is techniques, right? So you talked about Lemon, you talked about Nicoletta, you talked about Graham.
Yeah.
So is there, for the people that don't necessarily know dance, can you give sort of the crib notes, we call them, or the what is it in the university when you would get the summary? I can't, cliff notes. Can you give the cliff notes to these three different, you know, and just to give maybe adjectives that would describe the different technique and how, you know, how they fit or how they work? And it might be difficult because we're, you know, there's no visual here.
And me comes out now, right?
Say what? Say what?
So Martha Graham, as well as Doris Humphrey and Charles Weidman, all came out of one school called Dennis Shawn. Ruth St. Dennis and Ted Shawn had a school in California. And so Ted Shawn was sort of the mentor of Martha Graham, and Ruth St. Dennis, the mentor of Doris Humphrey, Charles Weidman. But, you know, they studied everything. And so because Ruth St. Dennis and Ted Shawn had not really developed a technique, but they were teaching what they knew, having studied Javanese dance, coming from the vaudeville tradition. So Martha Graham, as well as Doris Humphrey and Charles Weidman, were able to develop their own techniques. And so Martha Graham went into a technique that is based on contraction of the spine and the release of it. Yeah? So, and that most of the time happens to be a percussive way, a contraction and a release. And the technique of Doris Humphrey and Charles Weidman is based on fall and recovery, that release of the breath, the body falls and bounces back. Yeah, so it has a natural swing to it. So, I mean, really, there are so many differences, but between the percussiveness and the flow of Humphrey Weidman. And Jose Lemon, what I talked about earlier, was a disciple of Doris Humphrey, Charles Weidman. And so that Humphrey Weidman technique grew into the Jose Lemon technique. So the techniques that we talk about today are the Graham technique and the Lemon technique, and this is the history of that. And then out of that, with Graham, you know, Merce Cunningham took part of the Graham technique. He didn't call the contraction a contraction anymore. We called it curve. You know, so it made it more a bit more scientific. He was spatially interested in dividing the space like a diamond, you know, a brilliant cut, so that you have every facet, you have the tilts and the twists in the body.
Yes.
And so elaborate on that. And then he took the uprightness of the ballet technique and put those together, Graham and ballet, with the spatial, with the points in space.
Right.
And then a completely different tree, I talked about Alwin Nicolai. Alwin Nicolai is a disciple of the great Hanya Holm. Hanya Holm came from Germany and was in the Mari Wigman company. So that is the Laban, Rudolf von Laban, Mari Wigman tradition that Hanya Holm brought to the US. And Alwin Nicolai is probably the most known exponent of that technique. And so that is motion in space, movement in motion, influenced by the weight, by the space, by the time. So it is not necessarily a movement technique, but more of a movement theory put on stage, and that is constantly experimental, and that's what keeps it alive. And so it's the hardest to pin down, but it was great as a young dancer getting out of Juilliard, working with Alwin Nicolai. I mean, what a great experience that was.
Well,
so
this is another question I have. So it's like a chicken egg question. So the way that you described it was very particular and very, I mean, very exact. When the dancer is coming up with the movement, however, let's say, or when they're trying to grow into a style, or they're learning to present the choreography, I mean, is the mind, maybe I'm asking you, is your mind thinking as intricate with regard to the choreography, or is it sort of a natural, it comes naturally and then you assign some sort of, oh, okay, I just created something that you can see a theory behind, or you can see a consistency behind? How does it work?
Well, I think if you are working with a choreographer who follows a regimen where it is a codified technique, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have learned this codified technique, and there is a name for every movement,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is very helpful, but might not lead for you to truly experiment within the movement, to really investigate in the movement, because hey, it is a term that you learned and now you apply this.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a danger. I'm not saying that all of the people in a certain company do this, but it's a danger for a dancer to fall into a trap. For a ballet dancer, for that matter, you know, it's a codified technique. You do an arabesque, oh, arabesque. But if you have a choreographer who says, well, stretch your leg behind you like you want to reach another room, you want to reach the next room, and what could be in the next room, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And so your foot, your toes investigate that atmosphere, and you have little sensors on the tip of your toes, you know, while you're stretching your leg to the back. Well, it looks like an arabesque, but it is informed by an intent. So a codified technique is helpful.
Yeah, yeah.
And a choreographer and dancer with imagination make it live, right? Make it come alive.
Right. I understand. You have a framework, and then you play with the framework, or you want to play with the framework, and you
and
feel.
And I think you can sort of tell, you know, when a dancer might have been thrown in a piece with very little rehearsal, and it's still that cookie cutter
Right.
box. You know, when you go
Right.
to the ballet, and my God, a dancer, it just doesn't have it. He or she might have it after a couple more performances, but you know, in this time where we have so little rehearsal time, and you get the terms thrown at you and you execute them, and then you go on stage, and hopefully eventually it'll get better and richer, and you add the spice. But
Right.
sometimes, you know, even in New York, you get to see performances where it is going from one term to the next.
Well, I'm going to leave it. I'm going to leave it at that because I want to ask you specifically. Did you dance with the Limon Company, or what was the?
I had the great pleasure while I was still at Juilliard. I toured with them internationally.
Okay. Okay.
And we went to the Lyon Biennale, and we went to Eastern Europe, and so I got to dance with them in my senior year in that fall semester, in the first semester of my senior year, and you know, then I just was given assignments for my academic classes, and thankfully I've been ahead with a lot of the classes, so that my course load in my senior year was very little, so that when the opportunity came up, I
You just did it.
was allowed to do it. So fantastic.
And just to double back, when did you move to New York City? What was the year? Do you remember?
87, yes,
87.
August 87. I remember well.
Right, right. So
I came on TWA.
So you, like, while you were in dance, or in New York dancing, I was actually in college then, but I was in a dance company. And I think the backdrop for us was what, the late 80s or something. And I reminisce about that time period for a variety of reasons. Is there anything specific to that time period that you can remember when you arrived in New York, or it informed you as an artist or dancer or choreographer?
Come on, presence of AIDS. I mean, that was, as a human being, as an artist, as a young gay man, to have that heaviness surround you. I think that's a memory of coming to New York in '87. That is, as beautiful as New York was, and as exciting, and to get there, you know, as a young man, to have that threat to live with, and to see people die. That is, and the dance community was ravaged. So that's something that, you know, with all the positivity that I want to give, is I don't want to neglect. I don't want to neglect that. That is definitely had an effect on me, and I think on everybody in my generation.
Yeah, absolutely. And in some respects, it's still a strong memory, right? It's not something that, right, and it definitely informed the '80s. I also believe that,
and the '90s,
and the '90s, but I also believe simultaneously some of the best, and this is just me, my, biased, there was an energy or creativity that existed. I don't know if it exists now, and partly I think it's because of the time before that. New York was under great financial stress in the early or late '70s, and there were a lot of abandoned properties and that sort of thing. So the artists came in, at least the early ones. And I think I had moved there, my family moved there in 1979 in North Jersey. And I could feel the energy in New York, like everybody wanted to go there. Everybody wanted to be there, everyone. And I think it was this convergence of all these different professions and disciplines and people mixing it up, and there were great works and people supporting. And I loved there was an audience and a base, a very strong base. So for example, you would turn on television and you would see these commercials for Broadway, right? Like Evita, that was a very big production, right? So there were groups of people that were involved in that scene that were incredible. And I think, you know, that is my standard, you know, my standard for the arts. And I haven't necessarily seen that since. And I say all this
Well,
to
I
say,
think,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, I say that
Well,
to
I think
say that it's something that I wish, you know, for the future. I'm not sure how it's going to happen with all this technology and Corona and challenges that are actually pulling us apart as a community. What are your thoughts on the role of the arts currently in this environment?
well, I think that it is that hard times always remind you that you have a purpose. And I think that is a saving grace of a hard time, right? That that you become aware of your own resources, and that you see yourself as a resource, as somebody you can give. And I think in not so hard times, it lets you experiment, you know, lets you experiment with social media and the me, the ego in front of the little camera. And the and now hopefully we can use that knowledge for something with a purpose again. That would be my hope.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think social media is a wonderful thing. It does connect people. I personally have not been interested in choreographing for it. I love the stage. I love the response of an audience. Will I take to it in case I have to? I might, yeah. But the immediacy of live performance, of course, is so fantastic. But I think a live audience lets you know if you have succeeded in your purpose. I think online, you know, that might not be well, you might get fewer followers, but it's not as direct, you know. It's a completely different communication.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I love the live interaction between dancer and audience. You know, you can pick up an energy from a dancer as an audience member that on camera is just, it flattens everything out.
So let's say
So,
if you were asked to choreograph for film. So I know you, just as an aside, you studied with Stanley Donen, right? And he's a very famous. Well, he
yeah,
just passed away
Michael
last year.
Kidd, yeah.
Yeah, and he's done a lot of
Yeah.
great work with dance and choreography.
Yeah, but see, I mean, that is a completely different genre. I'm saying film. Film is fantastic. Oh my God, would I choreograph for film? Definitely. You know, but then you have the idea of a camera being, you know, being able to go around you, seeing things from different angles. What I'm saying is, you know, the dance for camera that we have to watch is like a kid, you know, putting up a camera in the front of the room, putting the phone down at an angle so that hopefully everything can be seen, and then the kid performing towards the camera. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like,
some of the stuff that you see on social media.
98% of the things that we see on social media are just like that.
Yeah,
right?
I understand. It's like right like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but I mean, having a film with a budget and, you know, having different camera angles and and being able to take different takes. Oh, come on. I mean, I would love it.
And that's what I think, that was the way it was a long time ago in Hollywood, where the choreographers were hired by the big studios. The people in business then knew and understood the role of dance and musicals and film and that sort of thing. And so then you have this big or large library of films and resources that you can still see today. And they are still much better than anything that we're getting today, I believe, because as you said, the focus was on that, and now it seems like dance is like a throwaway when you're doing sort of film, or the people that are involved are not as knowledgeable. It's not, perhaps this is something I'll throw out before going on to the next thing. Maybe the social media and the focus on sort of these people dancing in front of the camera, one shot, it might be the rebirth of dance in a bigger way. There hasn't been anybody that has been able to take that idea to Hollywood, because Hollywood's in a whole nother, it's more like action and sci-fi. But there's so many dance videos that are out on social media. You stumble on one just going through your phone, right? They're everywhere. Dance is everywhere throughout social media.
They're everywhere.
Right. So there could be an upside to the whole thing, right? The things that I see people like.
But what I want to point out, David, is the way that dance is valued.
Okay.
And when American Idol first came out, and the winner, I believe, got a record contract, right?
Yes.
Then when So You Think You Can Dance came out, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember, I believe correctly, that the first prize, the winner would be getting a contract as a backup dancer for a music star in Las Vegas.
Yes.
So it wasn't to have his or her own dance show produced, to put dance front and center. No, the first prize was to be a backup dancer. And that shows you that music is valued as a headlining art form, and dance is viewed as a supporting one by the television executives.
Yes.
And I was so mad. The problem was that a lot of my dancer friends said, oh, but that's going to be a really great job. It's got a really good contract. So even our own community, the idea that a winner of a television show in dance should have his own show, should have his own thing, was not even in the minds of my fellow dancers.
Yeah.
We as dancers don't value the art form enough, or are not mad enough to protest against it. I mean,
look, I understand, because
in Las Vegas, of course, it's a great job. But if you are the winner of a national television show, and the equivalent in the music world gets you your own record contract, then there's something amiss.
Yeah. Well, I think there are reasons for that. I think the education, people are not educated, and this is one of the reasons why I'm doing these video series, because after this is over, we're going to try to get this video out to as many people as possible. And that was my issue growing up. I kind of saw this future of dance in terms of what you just described, and I saw myself as a producer and dealing with the money in the audience. So, for example, I'll give you an example of this. When Don King, do you know the boxing promoter, Don King, with the big hair? He came to, when I was in law school and business school in New Orleans, he came on a self-funded tour around the country, and he came to New Orleans to the university. And I was like, oh my God, I'm skipping class. I'm going to see Don King. Okay, I'm going to see. I don't know what you guys are doing. I'm going. So I go there, and there's like 5 people in the audience. 5 or like maybe 12 people in the audience. And the administrators were really not so happy because he's, very controversial.
Yes.
They weren't happy that he was coming. I was like, oh, I'm going to be there because there was something about what he knew how to do, which I understood completely, and I wanted to do that for dance. So, I did work briefly in the music business, so I got that side as well. But in other words, there are not so many people that know how to bring this kind of thing to the masses. And another thing, I think, when these dance shows started to become popular, I think the first one was pitched, and they only allowed that show to exist during the summer, when apparently people are away on vacation. So in other words, this is just what I believe. We'd have to look it up. That the executives thought, well, if we're going to do it, we'll do it during the summertime, because if it doesn't work, it's no big thing. It's going to be during the summer where there's no audience. They usually put you in the place where, you're not going to get a big audience. And then it became a big hit. So then, the ball starts rolling. So you don't even have the players at the very inception at the table. So making the decision to say, we need to do this and cover this, or if the person wins, once that ball starts rolling, they're just trying to keep the ball in the air. And however it sticks, it sticks. So that's unfortunate, but we'll go on. Let me ask you this before we.
Great to get your perspective.
Look, I understand completely where you're coming from. In terms of demanding certain things, and a community does have to make a stand, right? It does. Let me ask you this, and I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to ask you, your background coming from Germany and communicating in a mother tongue, German, and then the translation into English, can you describe what that was like? Is there an impact on the movement? Is there some sort of information that maybe American people don't receive, or you have to work?
I don't think it is a problem between German and English that one thinks. I think it is more the type of person you are, and how you communicate. And of course, as dancers, a body language and a sensory awareness is there that helps in communication. So I think we're making too much of difference between different languages. In my first semester at Juilliard, of course, I didn't understand everything, but you mimic and get by. Actually, you know what you're supposed to do, and gain more confidence. And
well, the reason why I asked is, let's say, for example, when I started, when I did some choreography here in Basel, I brought people from Italy, and then I brought people from the US. So part of the issue that I had was trying to get them all to work seamlessly together. And there were a couple issues at hand, which was the lack of time. We only did, I think we had a week and a half. Right, to put on a show, and it was in a big space. Second was the fact that they moved so differently, then I had to choreograph around them. So I'd never choreographed until they were all in the same room, right? And I knew that their bodies were.
Let me ask you, are they moving differently because they're American or Italian, or because trained differently? Because
could be a combination of both. A combination of both. So what I had to do was make an adjustment for the different groups of people, right? And I would give a character, or I would build a character in, let's say, one guy that was from Italy, and I say I would give him all the hard stuff, like, or I would ask them to do all the lifts and all the strength move, because they were so into that. So I said, all right, okay, we're gonna choreograph this thing. So I mean, I understand, there are challenges that you get or you have to work with who you have. For you, let's say when you're working with students, how do you get them to, give you what it is that you want, or, your vision? There's always the vision, and then how you're going to get there. And, you've worked with students, you've worked with professional dancers. How does that work for you?
Well, November of 2018, work was presented by the students of the Ailey Fordham program, the BFA program. And so I had worked with them for that fall semester, and I had to audition the dancers. And in the audition, there was a great display of strength. Their legs were up to their ears. It was just fantastic. And yet I had envisioned a piece, to Mozart that was just taking them through space, like with swimming motions. And well, they didn't get that in the audition at all. And I was very much worried. And I picked the dancers that I wanted, and we started in the first rehearsal. But the dancers, the students, they picked up that I asked something different from what they were usually asked to do. And I think they just latched on to the information because it was different information. Just like, when I said, hey, I'm going to take the summer course at the School of American Ballet, or I'm now studying Indian dance or whatnot. Here, yes, I definitely did modern dance with them, but it was so far away from Horton as you can possibly can imagine.
Yeah.
So all the strengths and their held muscle-bound energy, gorgeous energy. Now I ask them to, just dive into water and lead with the extremity head, and lead with the extremity of the left fingertip, and by the time of the performance, my God, they swam like fishes. It was just fantastic. So I think if you have a vision yourself, then it is not about, you don't need to convince. I think that they will recognize it, that if, and I'm not saying that I'm always blessed with a vision from piece to piece, when I go places. Sometimes I just, I'm pulling my hair out, and then thankfully I have vocabulary to fall back on. This happened to be an inspired process, and sometimes it is a work-oriented process, and not saying that wasn't work, but it was so much fun that it didn't feel like work. So by work-oriented process, I mean that you utilize your craft if the inspiration isn't there. And so if you're commissioned to a work, hopefully the inspiration is there and it takes off. But I think in any situation, because you have studied for many, many years and know different techniques and have a wide movement vocabulary, so that if the dancers are not to your liking or are not as collaborative as you want them to be, that you can pull from different sources to make hopefully a cohesive whole.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm going to leave it with that last note. I mean, I could talk to you more and more. I mean, we didn't talk about Stanley Doonan as much as I would have liked. but we did talk about the translation into television, right? Dance and what's happening in social media and TV. And I think that's important because that's what we're dealing with right now. I mean, you and I are using social media to get this interview out. And so, you know, we're taking advantage
isn't
of
it great
this
to have
situation.
that opportunity?
Right. And there are reasons why I think it works now versus what's happening now with these interviews works at now at this point. Now, it may not have worked had we not had the current situation, right? Because everybody would have been busy doing their own thing. You know, now everyone's sort of boom, everyone's stops, right? So like a
the wonderful thing
choreographer,
for me, it has afforded me to go back into my digital vault, you know, and I've been doing the Sunday series, and you know, every Sunday have been releasing a video from the SENSEDANCE repertory for my company.
And this is on
you know,
YouTube?
just some pieces that I hadn't. Yeah, it's on YouTube. I have a channel called Dance Art Joy, all in one word, Dance Art Joy, because SENSEDANCE was taken, you know, so I had to take Dance Art Joy, but it's sort of SENSEDANCE, the sensory perception, and that is certainly how I approach it. But then, you know, Dance Art Joy, that's how I see it in the world. So it all works together.
Good.
And it is just a wonderful way to look at past repertory, you know, and then I remember, you know, there was a turn that didn't land.
Yes.
The whole video I can never put online, you know, and now it's 7 years later or 5 years later, and I'm like, oh, that looked pretty good, you know. So I'm a bit more forgiving now that I'm
yeah. I mean, look, now is an opportunity. I mean, it's not, you know, what's happening now is not good at all, right? But there are opportunities that are available to all of us, and I'm just happy. Look, thank you for taking your time to do the interview.
Oh, thank you for having me.
You know, and it's been a long time. Like, you know, I follow everybody on social media, just so you guys know. I'm looking at you guys and you don't even know it. So this is one of the reasons why I can reach out to the people and I'm more or less up to date with them. So, you know, I thank you for taking the time to talk with me, and I will see you soon.
Pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you so much, David. Be well, stay well.
Take care of yourself. Bye-bye.